Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. Let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, great topic today. We're talking Tesla ahead of earnings. Stocks pulled back about 12% so far this month. Price cuts and more price cuts and more price cuts. Are you guys seeing anything as far as your data goes that they're doing this for demand reasons? Because that seems to be a concern for Tesla and the EV segment as a whole here.
Yeah, I think that they just announced another round of price cuts even this morning. And so this is something that we've seen move the needle, at least in terms of our data, especially when it comes to consumer buzz and even when it comes to consumer demand. We first started to see these price cuts rolling in January of this year. And if you look at a track of consumer mentions of Tesla, at least on our chart, you can see a massive jump up, a massive spark that, all of a sudden this did help these vehicles to be perceived as more affordable by the consumer. And you can see this on this chart here. And now we've seen a bit of tempering since that initial, those initial cuts were announced earlier in January and February. Now we're trending about flat on a year-over-year basis, but now we're watching in the future to see if these additional cuts will prompt demand. Historically speaking, at least when we look at our data, these have prompted demand. So I think that this is very strategic just in terms of making Tesla affordable. And what's interesting is when we look at a happiness perspective, you think about a company like Tesla, they're perceived by the consumer on the same or even higher happiness levels than a lot of luxury vehicles like a BMW or even like Mercedes, like Daimler that we're watching. And so, they are much more affordable, though, than a lot of these vehicles. I think with recent price cuts, the Model Y is now under $40,000 with federal tax credits. So this seems more attainable for consumers. And when we look at a model breakdown, we can really start to see traction, especially with the Model Y, at least from a demand perspective on a year-over-year basis. So, for us, forward-looking, at least, we do think that these price cuts are likely to prompt more additional consumer demand and help just secure that and raise that consumer happiness because now these cars are more affordable for consumers.
Megan, in late January, remember, late January, Tesla came out and said that demand for their products exceeded their production levels. So one of a couple things is happening, and I hope in their conference call they're going to address this. Either these price cuts, and there's been officially 6 of them, either this price cut is because of some weakening demand that has come since late January, or it's that they are putting pressure on the other EV makers and showing dominance because they've got the margins to do this. So, and what will say that? I think in the conference call, you have to look for guidance on production levels. The guidance on production will tell you if demand is still there or growing or what it's doing. Your numbers seem to say that purchase intent for the Model Y is skyrocketing up 55%. Maybe some of the higher priced models don't have the same demand, but one of these things is going to be proven wrong, right? Either the theory that demand is weakening or the theory that this is just Elon Musk pressing his competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever we look at just overall consumer mind share, I think that Tesla's doing a really good job of defending that market share. When we look at mentions of consumers who are talking about purchasing a vehicle, nearly half of those, so 1 in 2 consumers are talking about buying a Tesla. And that's compared versus all of the other vehicles and models in our universe, from luxury to EV makers to, these traditional, a Ford or a Toyota. And so I think that that's pretty impressive that Tesla has managed to maintain this massive mind share in the eyes of the consumer, and these price cuts are definitely defending that mind share. We do see a little bit of a sign of weakening in the second quarter, and you can see that on this demand chart, and this is overall consumer demand. So mentions of consumers who are purchasing a Tesla no matter what model it is, and now we're only about 19 days in, so this is a really early read, but there is a little bit of tempering. So I think that these price cuts make sense because we have seen these price cuts be really effective at spurring demand. So if there is any perceived weakness, I think that these cuts will definitely help. But it also is a brilliant move to just defend that overall mind share of consumers who are excited about, purchasing an EV, and especially one that's perceived as luxury, and even more so if it's on the same, price level as another just traditional vehicle that they're considering.
Megan, and that's kind of my question here, because is this also, it might be a demand concern, right? Because maybe people, the ramp up in people buying new and used cars over the last 3 years has just been astronomical, right? So those levels have come down. But now, remember, everybody was late to play catch up as far as EV space goes. But now, if you look at some of the cars that are coming out of BMW and Mercedes and Volkswagen, and as you mentioned, they're comparing, the high-end cars like that with the Teslas, right? They're all releasing new models, and those are really starting to spend on advertising for those. And they're, in my opinion, better looking cars. Is that the concern for Elon Musk and Tesla, is that, hey, now we're going to be flooded with all these new models. Now I can pick and choose. I don't have to get a Tesla if I want an electric vehicle.
Yeah, I think that's some of the pricing power that Tesla is exploring right now with making these cars so affordable for consumers. But just from a happiness perspective, we do see Tesla, above the pack for most other models in our universe. And if you've ever ridden in a Tesla, or people who talk about riding in a Tesla or driving in a Tesla, it completely changes their whole perspective once they have had that experience. And we see just extremely high levels of consumer happiness whenever we look at Tesla. And so I think that this is something that Tesla definitely has going for it. And another thing that Tesla has is it's had years to, perfect its scale and perfect production. And I think its margins already speak to this. People are concerned, analysts are concerned about margins, and they're expecting, I think, gross profit margins upward of 20%, which is down from 30%, but that's much higher versus some of these other vehicles that are trying to get in the game. I think Ford said that it hopes its gross profit margin can be 8% by 2026. So there is a lot of catch up at play here. And I think that it's brilliant from a price cut perspective that, Elon Musk is playing this defense of this market share and this mind share that Tesla has developed without sacrificing the quality of the vehicle.
Yeah, all the OEMs, single digits as far as margins goes, mid-20, they're expecting about 25% margins for this quarter, which is down, as you mentioned. But do you have an earnings score for this one? Because it seems like the shine has been taken off of this stock, even though it's still up 47% this year.
Yeah, our earnings score, which it comes in a little bit bearish, a little bit on the softer side, and partially it's just because we do see some slowdown in growth, and we do see some slowdown in the macro trend. So whenever you look at just overall EV demand, that growth has tempered some, especially as gas prices have fallen comparatively versus last year. So a little, lost a little bit of those tailwinds just near term, but long term, we still see Tesla dominating consumer mindshare, and we still see consumers from a happiness perspective who really, really like this vehicle and are likely to not just purchase a Tesla, but also purchase another Tesla. So I think long term, we're still, this is a name that we really like, but near term, we do see a little bit of signs of weakening. So we'll be watching to see how that demand shakes out forward looking on the call as well.
All right, great data, great stuff as always, Megan. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio, breaking down